But yes, the show really begins on Saturday afternoon after that little curtain raiser, which will be a good game, I'm sure.
Yeah.
This is where the real gravy begins. Silverware on the line in Dublin.
Yes.
Saturday, kickoff 4:45 GMT. Ireland against Scotland. Ireland looking for the Triple Crown. Scotland obviously looking for
the winning record salvaged.
Exactly right.
And a crucial scalp over the Irish that they've yet to manage in a wee while as well. So
there's
there's some stakes in this one for sure. Like Ireland have a chance to take the lead on the table and force France to respond in the later game, as well as with claim that Triple Crown. So definitely intriguing pedigree for this contest, as well as the penultimate game, I should say, of this year's Six Nations. Refereeing the game is Wayne Barnes, Monsieur Barnes.
Current best in the business,
I would argue so. Assistant referees Carl Dixon and Christoph Ridley, with Stuart Terhige in as the TMO as well. In the Aviva Stadium in Dublin, that's where we're gonna see this curtain raiser to the main event later on. Scotland travelling across the Irish Sea. They have not won in Dublin in 12 years now. That is a long drought.
It is. The curiosity of these parallels, though. 12 years ago was the last time France won the Grand Slam, and on that last day Ireland had an opportunity to take the lead in the Six Nations and pressure France. And instead, they didn't even win the Triple Crown. They had Scotland in Dublin for the Triple Crown in the same year that France last won a Grand Slam, and they lost, if you'll recall. I was at that game. It was not fun. They scored a late try, and Dan Parks kicked a clutch touchline conversion, and down went the hopes of a Triple Crown. And as such, Ireland haven't claimed a Triple Crown at home since as early as 2004. That was the last time they claimed one on home soil. They've had a few in the time since, but their only one in the last decade was when they won the Grand Slam. And really, there was a brief era under Eddie O'Sullivan when France and Ireland were the two best teams in the comp, and Ireland won, I think, three Triple Crowns in 4 years. And actually 4 and 5 if you count the Grand Slam. Then in 2009 they won a lot of Triple Crowns, but those days were long gone and have been for a while. Like the Triple Crown is nearly as harder to win than the Six Nations. The Six Nations trophy gets awarded every year. The Triple Crown does not.
It's true.
And, Wales, Scotland and England have all been class in recent years, along with Ireland, and hence they're tough to win. I mean, a victory here for Ireland would be a great achievement for this side that has played so well in this competition. And for the fresh holders of the Rayburn Shield as of last week as well, Ireland have regathered that perpetual trophy. That's right. It has been bouncing around the old Rayburn Shield. We actually forgot to mention it, but it's actually broken its own record. It has 8 holders in a row have lost it. It's gone from I believe Australia lost to Scotland, then Scotland lost to South Africa, who then lost to England, who then lost to Scotland, who then lost to Wales, who then lost to England, who then lost to Ireland, who now plays Scotland. I don't know. Ireland, are they in a position to end Rayburn Shield? Exactly. It's breaking all the records of its 150-year history as the Rayburn Shield being the lineal title of the world. Yes, indeed. That was had by the Springboks up until they lost it to Australia last year. That's and then briefly got it back and then lost it again. So it's always interesting to follow that Fury about it, going like, oh no, I'm the lineal champ. Lineal champ's more important anyway. Exactly. Maybe. But don't underestimate that final day juju of the Scots, though. They haven't actually lost in round 5 since 2016, which is actually very good pedigree. And they just had a 33-33 draw. 38-38 draw that deprived them of the perfect record in the last 5. And obviously last year, a massive clutch end of game scenario, game winning out in Paris. Like that's. They've been bookending their seasons with good results recently. Usually been able to put it together in round 5. Usually frustratingly out of contention. But they have been able to put it together. It's easier for the passes to stick when you've nothing to play for sure. But definitely not to be underestimated from an Irish point of view. They'll definitely be gutted to have stalled once more, are the Scots. But adding that Irish scalp to their list, their trophy cabinet beforehand is important. Their cabinet of big away wins, which they've been racking up in the last couple of years, and this would certainly be as good as any of them. It's arguably more important than conquering France for them, because they need to play with Ireland and South Africa. They're a side that loves matchups. I mean, they always play well against England. They always play well enough against France. Obviously, they didn't this year, but they always play badly against Ireland, and they always play badly against South Africa. And those are the teams they have to deal with in their group next year. So they have to arrest some of that. They have to at least put in a competitive performance. But failing that, a win is what they're looking for sure. We're going to look into the preview now from both sides' point of views and their winning conditions for this one.
one, and we're going to start with Ireland, the hosts. That's ourselves, and it's an exciting new Ireland team as we've been building. The offense has been, the talk of the town, getting the Kiwis interested in how Ireland are attacking and running the pill, which is not quite unprecedented. But to be honest, it's actually been old Ireland and Joe Schmidt's Ireland that wrote the book on how to beat Scotland. To be honest, if you wanted a subtitle of Joe Schmidt's master plan for how to play rugby, it was the subheading is just how to beat and bully the Scots.
He thought he was writing a plan to win the World Cup, but in fact he was writing a plan to beat Scotland.
and it consistently has done that, and it remains to be seen whether we see this new exciting new Irish team revert to that type, given that it's been so successful, or we see a slightly different picture in this one to how this game goes.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ireland have been pretty steadfastly doing their own thing, and they talked about it in the build up to the Twickenham game. Was like, we're gonna stick to ourselves. We're focusing on ourselves, and it's just about delivering in that pressure cooker environment of Twickenham and not finding themselves reverting to something else. Be yourselves and play your own game, and they fairly steadfastly stuck to that. Now the issue was turnovers, and they turned over the ball 17 times in that game.
17 times last week, which is massive for Scotland, who tend to be good off turnover ball.
So that's an extraordinary stat. So I think logic tells you that even though their offensive game isn't tailored to one defence versus another, and they believe that if they play their game, they'll open up any defence, that maybe there's a case to be made for just tightening it up a little bit, like subtracting
going
not
off
totally.
Whiskey and Sexton mostly. Get your forward runners and your latchers a little tighter, and because the latch game has just done for, like, Scotland love to soak and jackal and try and generate a turnover, and just the Irish tendency to go round the corner off 9 with two latchers there ready to blast through the contact and the ruck is just has been enough for Scotland to soak meters after meters and ultimately look a little impotent in terms of flailing around trying to deal with that, and then looking very raggedy by the end in terms of the defensive exhaustion it puts on them when they're still trying to get in for rucks that are dead, and then there's space over, and then they're chasing the game and the passes are not going to deck. That's been the picture in this matchup so far recently, and I'm just curious to see what Ireland we see show up in that regard, because they have a playbook that's a little out of date for them this year and what they're trying to accomplish, but it is like pretty much a way to do for this Scotland team. So just winning the power game. I think regardless of whether or not they revert fully to that same shape, I think they will definitely keep some similar shape, and Sexton will want to be running off his forward pods and picking his best options. But I think they're going to have to put an emphasis on the quality of carry. First of all, just winning those contacts, carrying well, being good with your footwork to beat your opposite man and generate go for it, and then on the offensive breakdown and just generally ball protection. Protecting the ball is so important in terms of getting any kind of rhythm, and especially for an Ireland team that their attack is great, but it uses phases to work. Like it's about quick ruck ball, but it is about rucks. There are still plenty of rucks involved in what Ireland are trying to do. True.
And so they have to protect the ball better than they have been, which means tightening things up, not throwing all these offloads like you're winning contacts.
They did learn that lesson by the end of the England game, and those last tries came from not forcing the pass the same way. But in this Scotland matchup, and they've had evidence for it before, there's no need for that fancy offloading the tight, really, because the guy who's next to you, who you're trying to stick with the pass, is there to clear the ruck anyway. So just go to deck and go again, and force Scotland to backpedal and reset on the defence. That's what I'd expect to see. And then the kicking game as well. A varied kicking game is what you want to see from both Gibson Park, from Sexton, from Lowe. Good exits, but you want to kind of get that Scottish back three that can be so dangerous going forward. Get them on the turn. Find grass behind them.
Wales are an excellent kicking game kind of team, and Scotland are an excellent kicking game kind of team in a different way. Ireland played that game out of it against Wales by moving the ball really well. In Dublin, in the Aviva Stadium, where they're so comfortable, they ran the ball from everywhere. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter how good Liam Williams was in the air. It didn't matter how good Bigger's bombs were, because they didn't have the ball and they weren't able to stop Ireland. Scotland have a great defence too, but even like the Italians showed that they can be got at our first phase. And this Irish offence hasn't been stopped. I mean, there are plenty of great defences. France came closest. France did stop them for a half. They did. And then Ireland came back to life in the second half and answered with some great offence as well. England stopped them in part by shutting them down at set piece, but whenever Ireland were able to generate momentum and hold on to the ball, they opened them up and still found 4 tries in that game. They need to be confident in themselves. They need to, like, their offence is their greatest strength. It's arguably the best offence in the competition, perhaps even including France. And so they need to trust it. They need to trust it to go after this Scottish defence, to overload them, to win those collisions. And then if they're just getting quick ball and dominant collisions, they will unpick this Scottish defence. I don't doubt it.
I think. And then on the defensive end as well, Scotland present a different challenge to what England were throwing at them last week for sure. They'll need to be alert to that. Like first phase crucial because off scrum and line out, the Scotland team know how to run an offence and run a strike play. So big test for the centres. I think this week it's Bundy and Ringrose with Henshaw to come in off the bench as well. So massive task for all of those guys who will see minutes to try and read the right option, read where the ball's going and shut it down behind the gain line. Easier said than done. Obviously they're not facing Finn Russell this week, which is an interesting difference for them in terms of what the picture is, but nonetheless it's still Scotland.
It's different, but it's not that different.
No, it is. They still run the similar game when Kinghorn's in there.
Exactly. It'll still be Gregor Townsend's offence, which is all about speed off set piece, which can catch Ireland.
It can.
I mean, they're going to try and find the edge. They're going to try and isolate Ringrose off scrums. Off scrums they run great patterns, but usually it's like screen, then you find your edge, and you've got Hogg or someone like that sweeping on behind, and if Ringrose folds too far over, then they'll hit the short runner. They're really good at that. And then off line out, I expect them to try and exploit the same things that France exploit, where Ireland can overfold on the open side and then can be caught coming back against the grain. Townsend's wise to all that stuff, and I think that's
a good mind for drawing up plays for certain teams, and he draws up lovely first and second phase moves off set piece. So Ireland defensively, big job for the centres, big job for the back row and the pack as well to make their source a little scruffy as well, if they can get a nudge on at scrum time, or if they can get a hand in at line out legally, because Ireland again have been a little bit again too quick to toss a man clean across and give away a cheap penalty as well, which is not something they want to see repeated.
The penalty count was bad last week, 15 against them. It was
they need to tidy all of that up in this area, and then be able to try and exert themselves on the Scots. Guys like Josh van der Fleer getting up in the face out of the line to make the inside options just not options and force Scotland to force passes. That's where Ireland have found some good success recently, is when Scotland are trying to access that edge, but they're doing it like kind of panicked and reactively,
like what happened to them against the Springboks last autumn. That for sure. And I'd be confident that Ireland can be physical enough to get after the Scots in the multi-phase defence. It's the first and second phase defence that really it's relying
make or break
largely on Gary Ringrose as a leader of that defence with Bundy Aki to shut down what is a dangerous Scottish attack.
Truly, it's going to hinge a lot on whether they can succeed in that area or not. Then as well as getting on top of them physically across the park, the aerial challenge will be a challenge. Like, we're in Dublin, Ireland will kick some balls despite trusting the offence. Scotland love a 50-22 attempt, we know that. Big Stuart Hogg spirals and whatnot. Big day for Keenan, who's coming off the back of one of, if not his best showing in green. He needs to be alert, his position needs to be sharp.
His probably biggest weakness attributally is just that he's not got that like elite speed. He's not got that ability to cover the field like Bowden Barrett.
No, indeed. So his positioning and his awareness needs to be a little bit heightened, and the fact that we saw an interview with him a while ago and he was citing as an influence Ben Smith from New Zealand as a guy he's modelling, and it's like, that's good, Hugo. Keep thinking like Ben Smith and you'll be in good shape, because that guy was a genius on the field, who's like, again, quick and fast and strong, but not the quickest or the fastest or the strongest, but he was the best at making just the right read, the right decision every time. And that's where, like, Hugo does look like a man who's modelling his game like on that unspectacular, little unflash sometimes, but pretty correct most of the time, and that's what you want to see again. Controlled and assured from fullback is a key way to remove one of those Scottish ins, because those big kicks are a big in for this Scotland team with the new 50-22 rule as well. If you can diffuse some of that with assuredness from the back, that'll just discourage the Scots and encourage and embolden your own pack as well. Yeah, no question. They'll be looking to right the wrong of that of what happened to them last week. They've been talking about their scrum, saying they didn't have a bad scrum. They haven't become a bad scrum overnight. They have traditionally, in this curious sort of trifecta matchup between themselves, Scotland and England, they've had the Indian sign over Scotland, England have had the Indian sign over them, and Scotland have had the Indian sign over England. But it's one of those, math doesn't add up. The rugby maths doesn't end up. Just because we beat these guys doesn't mean we beat this lot. Correct. Well, look at the Rayburn Shield for the evidence. Indeed, But I mean, Ireland are it's a good game for them in terms of a get right game for this front row. Like, they've got Cian Healy back in there, they've got Tadhg
Furlong back in there with Dan Sheehan. They have to get that right. They've got Big Ian Henderson in from the start with Tyburn. Like it's a big area. Xander Fagerson has been struggling this year, to be honest. He's gone down. He should
be getting after him. Yeah. On the other side, now Schumann is a big challenge, and Furlong will want to be able to try and deal with the pressure that's coming on.
He's a great player, Schumann. He's not as good as Genge.
He's not quite as aggressive. As Genge. So it'll be a different challenge.
Exactly. They need to rally. They need to rebound at the scrum, and if they can get after the Scots in those areas and just control the ball, control the contact area.
And not just the scrum, the line out as well. Like a few times they were scuppered by Itoje and just by their own looseness at their own line out last week as well. They'll want to tidy up all those areas, and because they can launch off maul. Sure, their bonus point score came from one of the few set pieces they got right last week, and they saw the dividends from them. They know how to strike, and they know how to soak Scottish forwards in and then capitalise.
And they know how to beat this Scottish tight five up. I know Johnny Gray is back for them, and Grant Gilchrist has had a really dodgy tournament of it. In Daragh and Watson and Fagerson, you have, from a defensive point of view, guys who want to jackal, and as you pointed out, the latching and the soak tackling of the Scots can be punished for Ireland. So the pack need to be bullish about getting after the Scots, right in the wrong that was last week. They've had a couple of tough days out this year, where last year they won every forward battle they had. This is a big game for them to get back on the horse in their home stadium in Dublin, dominate the forward battle, and they will win the game.
And that's the plan from an Irish point of view. Win the game, try and do it with some style, put yourselves in the lead, and then sit back and hope that either France choke or England do the favour, or a combination of both. But that's the job from an Ireland point of view, is just get that win on the board and get yourself onto the top of the log, however briefly it may be.
Absolutely.
But from a Scotland point of view, we're another rough campaign, obviously. 2 from 2, having just beaten the Italians last week, although not wholly convincingly, if we're being brutally honest as well. It's just one of those seasons that's just drifted by, and with the promise of last season and their wins over England and France in Paris and in London, it's disappointing the way they followed up. But it's a chance to right some of those wrongs. It's a chance to get a serious scalp, as we were saying, in advance of those World Cup pools, generate a bit of momentum into the off season, but also a bit of confidence to glean and to take into that very, very difficult pool group that they're going to be facing in 2023. So there are still stakes. It's not a dead rubber for Scotland, although it is just another season goes by, and we're in week 5 in the Six Nations, and they aren't playing for anything, which is a frustration.
Indeed, as the years tick on for Townsend's team, another year without silverware beckons. But as we pointed out at the start, they have a great record in round 5 in this competition. On the pitch, this is such a phenomenally tough matchup for them. It's not one they've dealt with well.
Haven't really seen them evidence of them beating that physical power based short game yet. And the most recent evidence was the South Africa game that they played, and it was a sad sight by the end.
As you pointed out, Schumann is the guy who's come in and given a freshening to this Scottish tight five and added stuff. They've got Johnny Gray back in the side this week. It's just got to be a huge performance for him. He has not played well against Ireland ever, and likewise Grant Gilchrist, who has been for some reason trusted to continue despite having a really poor Six Nations. I feel
and with many other locks who are putting their hands on like Swinson.
Cummins was really back in the squad this
for
week.
Saris every week, and you're like, there's good locks out there. So if they get dominated in Dublin, then it'll obviously not be a vindicated decision, but that's not the plan.
They need to rally. They need to make things happen. They need to stop the Irish with physicality. Like we've seen Herculean efforts out of the likes of Johnny Gray against England, where he's cutting good lines, where he's getting out of the line and making big tackles. He's smothered the likes of Itoje. They have done that before. Like if you can do that to England's tight five, you can do it to Ireland's, but we just haven't seen it so far. And they need to find it in a big way, that tight five. That said, obviously defensively, we'll get into that. That's a tough matchup against this excellent offense. But they never look better, the Scots, under Gregor Townsend, than when they're playing free-flowing, attacking footy. And it's probably part of the reason why round 5 goes so well for them. They've been together a while. They start to gel. The pressure's off usually by round 5 for them. And then all of a sudden they can just focus on their offence. And despite last week being a dodgy week against Italy...
it wasn't for Ali Price, who was sticking lovely passes.
It wasn't for the offence in general. They scored 5 tries. They got 1 off a kick return. They got an interception, which they ended up taking brilliantly because they're so good in the open field. They had a scrum strike play. They had a multi-phase set that resulted in a great Russell-Graham connection on an inside ball. And they had a sort of a chaotic phase where Ali Price was able to cut through the line off a broken field ball. Yeah. And they gelled really well with each other. They read the game off each other. Once the line was broken, the try was inevitable in exactly the way that it wasn't in that clutch game against France. Yeah. But nevertheless, it was excellent against Italy last week with Price running the show. And that needs to return for them again. Obviously, it's just a huge job for Blair Kinghorn to try and produce that, because you think of these round fives, like my thought is always goes back to Finn Russell against England from 31-0 down to just finding those plays.
Happen. Yeah, but he is on the bench and he will come in for that last quarter anyway to try and make something happen, and the idea is to be in touching distance with it when that happens, and part of that will be punishing Irish errors on exit. If Ireland are getting rambunctious with their offence and playing out, then maybe punishing them with excuse us there because the camera goes by there, we'll go visual, but punishing them with a few kind of quick poaches, cheap threes. That'd be an ideal in for them away from home to try and just get a foothold in the game, but then from there trusting their strike moves off set piece to try and open this Ireland team up, try and exploit some of the slight speed deficits, sometimes the physicality deficit, if you can isolate Ringrose and overload him out there.
Exactly. I mean, you run those kind of multiple screens and just sit down the inside defence and then leave Gary Ringrose in a situation where he has to shut down Hogg running an arc out on his outside. Ringrose might struggle to make that tackle, and then all of a sudden Scotland, when they get to the edge, have been excellent at finding tries, and that for sure is their best matchup. Ireland's defence has been good this year. I'm often pretty harsh on it on the podcast because it looks, when it goes wrong, it looks very bad, it looks slow. But that is Scotland's best in this game. Their best matchup is their offence versus Ireland's defence. Can they make that work and get some scores?
It's got to be that, and they've got to get some scores.
And they've got to stick the passes.
Too often we've seen that one, obviously the French one getting all the highlights, but we've seen in this particular game, Ireland v Scotland, it be a very close contest that Scotland have a chance on 50 or 60 minutes to cut through and take the lead with a beautiful coast-to-coast 7-pointer, and it's only the last pass that just inexplicably gets dropped out of nowhere, and they can't afford repeats of that. Those passes need to stick. They're in Dublin, haven't won here for 12 years. It's got to go. So it remains to be seen whether it can do. The biggest question is still the stopping of the Irish offence, and their defence has matched up so poorly against the more rudimentary offence that many teams have found very easy to defuse. Scotland hadn't been able to diffuse that yet and haven't shown evidence of it. Plus you have a lot more layers coming at you now as well, so big task for your Harrises in the back three to try and, or in the midfield, to shut all that down, but also just the pack in tight five with the pack in general have to step up and make positive context. One contact in every three has to be a positive Scottish one. If you're letting Ireland roll over you, it's just, you saw in the Wales game in the opening day that it's untenable to defend them if you're not going to drive them backwards.
No, indeed, and that was it. That Ireland, their multiple options are incredible. Ireland's offense is wizardry at its best. There's so many different options. You've got Sexton running the show.
Well, just Furlong slotting in at 10. You've got to respect his hustle and his power, and you've got to respect the ability to get the pass away.
I've yet to see it stopped, but I think the chink in its armour was laid out by England last week,
and by France in Paris.
France in Paris was different. France in Paris was dominating them physically in the contact areas. As much as you say 1 in 3 contacts has to be a positive one, yes, but at the same, like Scotland, we know for a fact are not going to come out of the line and start smashing Ireland back on 2 or 3 phases in a row like France did, and then blowing them away at the breakdown. It's not who they are. What they might be able to do is attack the pill relentlessly at every contact, at every breakdown, force turnovers. They need to really force Ireland to respect the ball. They need the Irish players carrying with 2 hands on the ball, looking to protect it, because they're so fearful of the Scottish look going after them on every occasion. It'll slow down the passing game, it'll slow down the offloading game. If I was doing a crash course for Scotland on what to do to stop Ireland, that's where I'd start. Attack the pill. They've got a back row that's great at it. It's true. Pretty much Daragh and
they just need to adjust to that, because they love to soak and jackal, and it just doesn't match up well against Ireland ever. So shift of focus, different tactic. We're going to swing an arm in at the pill every time we go into the contact and try and dislodge it.
Absolutely.
It's a legitimate NFL play. It's a very legitimate rugby play now as well. Try and get the arm in, dislodge the pill. And Ireland, as you say, the stats to show, they coughed up 17 last week. Scotland should be saying let's try and make it 18 this week. that's definitely a recipe for them to manage to find a famous victory on away soil, on Irish soil, that has been so elusive. Part of it will be generating those turnovers and being proactive in that contact
getting
area.
Getting after them off them. Yeah. It's striking off lineouts, getting some blindside wingers involved, some trickery, getting some points on the board, frustrating Ireland on the other end, and then it's a tight game. Who
favourable
knows?
matchups and managing to stick passes.
Exactly. Just making Ireland uncomfortable, like they did with France last year, making Ireland uncomfortable with the fact that they aren't dominating, that it is a ding-dong battle, and then clutchily, if that's a word, finding the winning score.
Clutch, yes, indeed. Yeah, that finding a winning score would be a nice one. Playing with a bit of clutch and a bit of heart, also important. The Scottish temperament, minding that away from home, not allowing the moments that Ireland are on top to weigh on them too heavily as well, minding their own temperament as much as trying to proactively stymie Ireland's. You can't expect for them to wilt, and nor can you respond to their purple patch by wilting yourselves, and that should be the lesson they gleaned from the France game themselves. But coming away from home to Dublin, they're going to have to be on their blow, and even though they know, they have to accept going in, it's not all going to go their way. Ireland are going to have periods of play that are going to go their way. It's how they respond that's the biggest test for this team.
If they can respond to Irish tries with tries of their own, then they're going to be in this game come the last quarter.
Absolutely.
And Finn Russell
comes in, and suddenly it could be a bit of magic. With that though, what do you think will happen?
I think I'll stick to what I said last week. What I said last week was I trust the Irish offence. I've yet to see it stopped. It always finds tries. It always does enough. So far in the last year, they've scored 24 points at least in every single game. 12 game streak of scoring at least 24, and very often much more than 24. I trust it. I think it's been great. I think we can do enough on the defensive end to stop Scotland keeping up with our offence. And even last week, even when things didn't go well for us, we still managed to find tries with our great offence, and we did in Paris as well, despite them blowing us away. And I think the Scots will get some plays off. I think they will frustrate us with some turnovers, but I trust us to overcome that and to keep on them, and ultimately to let them wilt and to find the tries necessary to win the game and hopefully claim a triple crown.
That'd be nice. And to be fair, that's where my head's at as well. I think we're probably a little too good for this Scotland team on in a few areas. A little. I don't think it's a lot. I think Scotland are bloody good. But I also have faith in Ireland's ability at home. I think Dublin, the Aviva is just a bit of a fortress as well. Triple crown on the line, potential for Six Nations to win. I think Ireland will be keen, even despite a record-breaking bonus point win in England last week. The emasculating fact of what happened in the scrum will be good messaging to dial them in and just be focused. And by contrast, I think Scotland might just see that Ireland are here to play and might just kind of not respond as well as you would hope they had with Kinghorn out there instead of Russell. It's a little bit of change and a bit discombobulated too. I think Ireland should just be able to fancy putting the squeeze on, get on top of them and win the game, probably by between 5 and 10 points is where my head's at.
I'm inclined to agree. I think we've said our piece. But listen, let us know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you fancy Scotland in this one to pull off the upset as they did in 2010, as they've done so frequently in recent years in round 5?
A bit of that mirror imaging.
Finn Russell second half magic. Or do you think Ireland are too good? They're going to get this win, get the triple crown, get themselves some silverware, and put themselves in a great position going into next season. All your thoughts down below in the comments. But with all that said, I think we're going to move on. True. Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.